Well, to Brussels next, where EU interior ministers are this Friday holding crisis talks on migration. It comes against a backdrop of tensions between France and Italy over how to handle the crisis. Well, European capitals say they're increasingly concerned about new pressure on sea routes from North Africa and overland through the Western Balkans. Amid Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the EU says it's bracing itself for many more war refugees this winter. Let's get you more on this. Dave Keating joins us from Brussels. Dave, we've been saying this afternoon, this all comes against the backdrop of these tensions that just won't let up between Paris and Rome.
Yeah, exactly. This all kicked off a couple weeks ago when a charity ship that had picked up rescued migrants in the Mediterranean Sea requested to dock in Italy and were refused by the new far-right government of Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. That ship was eventually allowed to dock in France, but not gladly. France majorly criticized Italy for turning away that ship, and it had repercussions for the relationship. France decided to not follow through with an agreement they had reached through an EU framework to take in around 5,000 refugees from Italy. That was through a burden-sharing exercise at EU level, and France has started checking passports on people crossing from Italy into France. That is a border that's normally open under the EU's Schengen Code. So this meeting was requested by both sides, by both the Italians and the French, in order to resolve this dispute. And this is an emergency meeting. This wasn't a normally scheduled meeting. So inside right now, they are trying to figure out both how to resolve this particular disagreement between France and Italy, but also how to handle the larger migration situation. There has been a surge of migrants crossing the Mediterranean during the warmer months, as is usually seen during this time of the year, but the numbers this year have been particularly high. We're expecting a press conference at the end of the summit around 7 p.m. tonight. We'll see if they can make some progress here, but expectations for that were majorly dampered down by the EU Home Affairs Commissioner Ylva Johansson as she was entering here on the red carpet behind me. Earlier, she really was saying that probably agreements won't actually be taken until the next regularly scheduled meeting of EU Home Affairs ministers, which is happening on 6 December.
All right, Dave, in Brussels for us. I mean, another thing before we go would be to kind of look at whether anything will actually come out of this meeting.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big question. Obviously, expectations have been tempered down. But there is hope that maybe this most recent fight can get the EU to finally agree to a reform of its migration rules. They've been trying to do this since 2015 and have just had no luck. Even the things that have been agreed at EU level haven't been followed. Last week, the European Commission came out with a proposal for an EU framework specifically on these charity ships, how that should be handled, what countries are supposed to take them in. But a lot of people have pointed out this is just a rehashing of existing rules that national governments just aren't following. They're just ignoring. So there isn't much hope that that proposal is going to lead to much of anything because governments clearly already don't like what's in there. You might ask, why is this all kicking off right now? Well, obviously, we have a new far-right Italian government that's eager to prove to its voters that it is following through on its promises to get tough with migration. But also don't forget the time of year. We are heading into the winter, and every year we get an increase of rhetoric and propositions from governments right around this time, and we're seeing that right now from Italy to France to the UK. Why? Because migration numbers always fall during the winter. And later on, in a couple of months, politicians can take credit for those falling numbers, pointing to what they said and did in November and saying, look, because of what we said or what we did, the migration numbers have fallen. So when I talk to experts on migration here in Brussels, they say, look, there's a lot of hot air behind these walls, behind me, because this is politicians really playing for a domestic audience. They're not leaving much room for European compromise. There was a hope that Sweden, which is taking over the rotating EU Council presidency on January 1st, could maybe finally broker a deal. But after that Swedish election in September, when we now have a hard-right Swedish government propped up by a far-right party, the Sweden Democrats, the political maneuver for them to negotiate an EU compromise on migration is very, very little. So people I talk to are not very hopeful that we're going to get a new framework on migration for the EU today, next month, or even next year.